Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. This show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. We're going to talk about how important is the U.S. presidential race. And we chose that title because Chris, welcome, Chris Thorne, this is the third time on the show again because he's just so darn goofy and wonderful and to spend time with. I had to have him on a third time.
Actually, it's the fourth time.
Fourth time?
Well, yeah, but it's nice.
I don't lose count.
Well, yeah, it's the fourth time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
how you doing right now?
Oh, me, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, I'm usually good.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying life.
And I'm nervous.
What?
I'm always nervous.
Why?
Because whenever I'm with somebody and they haven't talked to them for a long time, it makes me very nervous.
Huh, you should see your shrink about that.
Is that how it's going to be? Let's shut down right now.
All right, no. Let's keep going. No, there's no reason to be nervous. We're just going to sit here and talk about what's going on in Crazy Town, USA, in terms of this presidential carnival.
Yeah, that's what it is. So let's talk about the bio section, about who you are.
Okay.
And I know you've been there before. People know
3 times.
who I am. I'm going to ask you again, if I ask your best friend, who is Chris? What would your best friend say? Chris is what?
Somebody I can depend upon.
Somebody I can depend upon. Is that true?
Yes.
All right.
If they are if they have achieved, if they've survived the 3 rings of fire and become friends. That works both ways. I think people have to go through about 3 rings of fire to earn the title friend. Friend's a very big term for me. I don't have very many of them. My dad told me I should always deal with quality, not quantity, when it came to friends.
See, this is an example of how it's going to go tonight. We're going to wish we had 3 hours instead of 1.
That's okay. No, that's it. I think, yeah, friends have to be tested, and they have to test you.
Of course.
So I would say, yeah, Chris is somebody who'll tell me what he thinks, and I can depend upon him. I think that's what they would say.
All right. And when and where were you born?
Charleston, West Virginia,
Charleston.
31st of October, 1937.
Mm-hmm. Why were you born?
Why was I born?
Everyone always repeats that question back to me.
Well,
I asked you first.
No, I know, but when I wasn't, it was just gaining a little bit of space and to think about it. Why was I born? I was born because my parents cohabitated, and there's a natural biological process by which I emerged. But if you're talking philosophically, I haven't.
That's what I'm talking
about. Oh. Philosophically, why was I born? I haven't a clue.
Uh-huh.
I'm not really all that interested in why I was born. I'm more interested in what's going on in my life.
My viewers are interested.
Oh, and well, your viewers might really be out of luck because I have not even given that an enormous amount of thought. I could say, in a philosophical sense, to experience life and to journey the world, to really travel the world.
Uh-huh.
That's what I would say. I don't know how much good that does.
That's good. I am a living example right now, looking you in the eye as to why you were born.
Oh, is that right?
When you meet people like me and you give them something, you give them your essence and your reality, your core reality. You can't hide from me.
Wait a minute.
That's why you were born, to give us something.
No, wait a minute. But you're talking about something, and you're talking about essence.
Okay.
All right.
Both.
I don't give the essence of me is personal and private to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Period.
You can only hide that to a certain extent.
Do I try to hide it, or is it deep, deep inside me, and is not visible to except for those very few people who can make the journey and gain entrance.
And if you...
Not so much hiding it away, it's just deep in there.
Uh-huh. Have you glimpsed it?
Glimpse it, I go live with it.
Uh-huh. Do you like it?
Mostly.
Okay.
There's some dark spots and dim corners and things.
Well, how could you see the bright corners if you didn't see the dim ones?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Religious preference.
I'm unaffiliated.
Gosh, dog it.
No, I do not belong to any formal religion. I don't consider myself to be a particularly spiritual person. I'm very much a now kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been that way a long time.
You're a member of ISIS?
Am I a member of ISIS?
This is the last provocative question.
Most assuredly not.
Of course not.
Okay. Nor any other radical organizations that hurt people.
Yeah.
None of them.
How about a racial, national, or cultural heritage? Any comment about that? African American.
Yeah, but it's a bit. My dad's from Barbados, so that has been a multicultural society for any number of reasons for quite a while, even as it was being populated back in prehistoric times.
Barbados. And how come you look the way you look?
How come I look the way I look?
Your complexion, your hair, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, this is hormonal. I used to have a big fro, I mean, just...
No.
Yeah, absolutely. I could show you some pictures, but I don't know where they are. I don't keep track of them. My wife keeps track of those things. Yeah, I had a great big fro out. And, but it just, as it goes away, it just seems to get a finer texture.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. Some genes cropping up. There's a whole lot of white folks in the woodpile way back.
That's what I'm looking for, because
they're in there. But who I am and where I place myself in the should I say in the ethnic spectrum, or might be a good way to put it, is a part of my upbringing as well as anything else.
Yeah.
And my parents defined themselves as Caribbean African Americans, etc.
Look at that.
Look at that. What do you say about that?
We're so similar. See, that's why I asked you. Because
and you come from New Orleans, so you got multicultural. There's all kinds of people in the woodpile.
You name it. In the woodpile. It's going to be that kind of night.
All right. Okay.
Okay. So, do you do any money-earning work nowadays?
No. What work I do in the areas that I have worked in is almost always pro bono. I have not looked for, nor have I. I've gotten some offers, but, it's a been there, done that kind of thing. And I'm not really, I think my passport expired a couple of months ago. I don't plan to travel. I've spent most of my life traveling.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute, too. And your formal education?
I graduated from Public School 69 in Jackson Heights, New York, 8th grade. And that's not the end of my education, either academic or, I should say, formal or life education.
So who are you going to support in this coming election, Trump or Hillary? They're both New Yorkers,
Yeah, I'm aware of the fact that Trump is probably the more legitimate New Yorker insofar as he comes from Jamaica Estates, all right? But I don't know how much of he's a prep school kid, so we had fairly negative things to say about the kids that would leave the city and go to prep school, because not a lot of us were going to prep school. Anyway, Hillary is a carpetbagger, so her whole life experience has been moving to places that are politically advantageous to her, or scholastically. And who am I voting for?
You let me ask the question.
No, you
Go
did.
ahead, please.
You did ask the question.
Okay.
And you said, are you going to vote for Hillary or Trump? Well, I definitely wouldn't vote for Benito or Il Duce or whatever name you want to give him. I consider him to be probably the worst thing that could happen to the American presidency. And there's a great scene from Master and Commander, that Russell what's his name?
Crowe.
Russell Crowe, movie about the commander of a British frigate, a battleship, or not battleship, but warship, back in the, what was it, the 18th
Sailing
century,
ships, yeah.
18th century, 19th century. Anyway, and where they have this, he asks a question of the doctor, who is not a seaman or anything like that, and asks him to select which of the two weevils that have crawled out of the bread would be the one he would select if he had to pick the weevil that he would take on with him through life. And he said, well, I would probably pick this one because he's bigger and stronger and more mature and everything. He said, no, you made the wrong decision. He said, you should always choose the lesser of two weevils.
Oh,
so when you ask me who would I vote for, Trump against Hillary,
yeah.
I'd vote for Hillary because she's the lesser of two weevils. I would prefer to vote for Bernie. Mm-hmm. We can hope. Hope springs eternal from the human breast, I'm told. Yeah, I'm very much a supporter of what Bernie's trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm also a realist, and I know that's not an impossible dream, but it's an improbable one.
Okay, we got to go further into that later on. Yeah. Oh. And you consider yourself pretty much retired anymore from actually formally working or hiring yourself out to get paid.
Yeah, right. I'm not working. I mean, I'm not working at what I have done in my past incarnations, my past employment not really employment, because I work with people more than working for them.
So what were you doing when you were working?
15 years before I came back. 15 years before I came back, I was in Rwanda transforming a fish farm, transforming it from a national fish station into a commercial fish farm.
That was an interesting interview.
Yeah, well, we had a good time. That was the third interview when we finally, and we had, so, if that's still on YouTube.
Oh, yes.
All right, well, people ought to check that one out because it's kind of interesting in its own right. Before that, I worked with the UN for 18 years.
18 years.
Just under 18 years. So a total of 32 years outside the States. And before that, I worked with State Department and I was in the military, and I worked at the department, what was then the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare for, that was from 69 to about 73. So that was about 4 or 5 years. So,
how many countries have you been in?
I don't know. My dad kept track of that. My dad visited 136 countries. He loved to travel. And I don't keep track of it. I could probably, but that would take a long time. I've been in a lot of them. The overwhelming percentage of them have been in sub-Saharan Africa because that's really where I wanted to work. But I've also worked in Asia and done some work in Europe and the subcontinent of India and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
But there are places I have spent very little time, like Australia. Never been there. Australia and New Zealand I have never been to. I've never been to...
You've been everywhere else.
I have visited South America and Central America, but very briefly, and more in a visitor tourist passing through kind of thing between jobs, or going somewhere on a job and sneaking away for some time in Rio or Buenos Aires or someplace like that. But very little time. I've read about them, and seen a lot of movies and documentaries and things. But those are two places that I have definitely not been. But I've been as far away as Kathmandu and as close as...
Oh, man.
Yeah, right. The airport at Kathmandu is an experience in its own right.
It's too long, isn't it?
It's too short. And you got shears that are the granddaddies of all, crosswinds. Because it's smack in the middle of the Himalayas, right?
Yeah.
So, I've been a lot of places. It's been a good ride.
Your favorite ones?
My favorite countries?
Those places you've been, yeah.
That's a good one. My favorite country.
Yeah.
I had some of the most rewarding human experiences when I worked in what was then Zaire, in Lubumbashi. the people there were just phenomenal, and there was a Rwandan community there that just, my wife is Rwandan, so,
Yes.
and it just enveloped us. You know, I mean, it was just the warmest, nicest place I've ever been, and our daughter was like starting preschool and stuff. So it was just an incredible time. The work was hard and challenging, but it was an incredible place to be. The people I was working with, the refugees, my constituents, were all from the surrounding countries, but primarily they were from, God, I'm trying to remember, that was a while back. But anyway, that would be one of the favorite places that I've been. And yeah, that's it.
You've traveled so many places. Did you learn to speak any other languages besides English?
That's an interesting question. I continue to tell people, they say, I've worked in places where French was a primary language that was used, and other countries where Swahili was the language that might have been used as the lingua franca, and the language of commerce and stuff like that. But pretty much in East Africa, you find Swahili as one of the major languages.
Did you learn a little of that?
Tiny little bits. But in terms of French, I spent a lot of time in countries that were francophone, and people would say, "Oh, don't worry about him. He doesn't understand French." And that was because they asked me if I spoke French, and I would say no. And they would say, "Okay," and they would try to speak to me in French, and I'd say, "I don't speak French." Doesn't mean I can't. It means I don't. And one of the reasons for that is you learn an enormous amount from people when they really get used to you not knowing their language. And that's fine. And my French is passable. All right. If I could live on my own and speak reasonable French after I were immersed in it again. But in a great many places, it doesn't really make an enormous amount of difference. I went there to do work and I had good translators most of the places that I worked. In fact, every place that I worked. And I found it was a lot faster. It was expedient to use translators to get through languages, any language, rather than trying to bumble along. Plus, I like the English that is my mother tongue. And I'm reasonably, and some people say unreasonably, articulate in my mother tongue. And my problem is, I think speaking it's difficult for me because you have to start out as a child in a way. And I don't like not being able to communicate. That's the truth of it.
Okay. And we did talk about your education, which you did, and you mentioned your wife and your daughter was here recently.
Yeah, me and my daughter.
Say a little bit about your family. How many kids? And
I have 3 sons and 1 daughter.
no,
That makes 4. My daughter is the last one born. My 2 eldest sons are from my first marriage, and then there is 1 child from between marriages, and then there's Krista. So then there's 4 altogether. And they're great kids.
where are they now?
Peter is now the director for communications for the Department of Corrections in New York City, which is a hot spot. That's the Rikers Island place. And he's working with a well-known reformer of prison systems. He's like a turnaround guy. And they've got their work cut out for him. And he recruited Peter. Peter, before that, was an Emmy-winning TV journalist for about 10 or 12 years in a major TV station in New York. And Jeffrey is a former actor and is basically a writer and a graphic artist, and he lives in Los Angeles. And Jan is a high school teacher and a football coach outside of Boston. And they're all great kids. They're really good people.
Are they all as bright as you are?
Are they all as what?
Bright as you are.
Oh no, they're much brighter. They're far brighter than I am. No.
Yeah. How would you characterize your position on the political continuum? Are you left or right? We know that you like Bernie and you feel the burn.
I definitely feel the burn. My landlord, who's become a very good friend of mine too,
Good.
had put a lawn stick sign out in front. He said, "Is that okay?" I said, "Yeah, but I like the one that says not for sale on it and has Bernie's name underneath that. I like that." But he couldn't find one of those. That's a great yard saying, not for sale.
Yeah.
Where would I place myself on the continuum? Independent, progressive. One guy described me in a magazine piece he did, described me as being politely radical. I thought that was really.
I like that.
I like that I was politely radical. I said, that's not bad. I'm politely radical on the outside.
If Hillary is the Democratic Party's candidate for the presidency, are you going to vote for her?
Well, as I said when we began, I will, but only because she's the lesser of two evils.
You did it again.
Yes.
I'm not going to invite you to that anymore.
All right, no. No, but not punning at all, I consider to be the lesser of two evils. Donald Trump is the face of fascism, and people really need to deal with that reality. Okay? I went back and did some research. I was a kid when Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler came to power. I mean, born in '37. So when we got into the war in the Pacific, I was 4 years old, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. All right? But I lived in a family that was incredibly curious and well-educated and debative. You know, I mean, loved to debate issues and stuff. For my grandmothers and uncles and my dad in particular. So I learned a lot about that period of time. As I grew beyond it, the war ended, but we never forgot talking about what fascism was all about, mm-hmm. and how it could come into being. And I went back and I looked at some of the film clips, and Donald Trump is a dead ringer for Benito Mussolini. He's stocky, soft. Mussolini did not look soft, but Trump looks large and soft. Probably all those billions cushioning his every move. But the same posturing, the same bombast, the same identifying scapegoats as the reasons for all of the problems that existed in the world. His strong-arm tactics.
So he looks the role that
he looks it, he walks it, he talks it. And I believe he believes all of the stuff he's saying. What little substance it has wouldn't be hard to believe if you if you want to believe in something that's insubstantial and essentially full of hate. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to hate people.
Yeah.
I mean, in a general sense, there are a few people I don't like at all, but that's individuals. They have to earn that dislike. So that's what I would do with it.
Okay.
Hillary, on the other hand, is a machine. She's political. She's a shark, politics. And that, to me, is another thing that we have to be concerned about.
I see that some of the research suggests that some people, if they have a choice between Trump and Hillary, will not vote.
No, I'll vote. I'll vote. Yes, indeed. I will definitely
And
vote.
if Trump is elected president, are you going to stay in this country?
Deep trouble.
Are you going to stay in the country?
It's my country.
Yeah.
And I did something he didn't do. I fought for it. I'm a vet. And people won't deal with that fact. He got 4 student deferments.
Yeah.
That's coming out of prep school, all right? Where he was a star athlete in a military prep school for 4, no problems, okay? And then there had to be student deferments, right?
Yeah.
So you have to renew that every year. And then suddenly, when he went to graduate school, he got a permanent deferment from the Army. Daddy was multimillionaire.
Yeah.
And he talks about how much he loves vets. He's a hypocrite.
Which war were you in? World War One.
My dad says he's the luckiest man alive. He was too young for the first and too old for the second. Right? I served during the Vietnam era, 1961 to 1964. I was in the service of King Jack and Queen Jacqueline and Crown Princess Caroline.
Yeah.
And then tragically, I was at Fort Hood, Texas, just 60 miles south of Dallas when the president was assassinated.
Yeah.
And that was shortly before I was coming out of the Army. About a year and a half before I actually was discharged.
How long were you in Vietnam?
Well, I was in Vietnam for 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. And that was when I was working with State Department. But before that, they had TDY duty that they did. My unit was in Korea, but they sent guys on TDY to do, grunt work, truly grunt work. And we weren't even really listed on books and stuff like that. At any rate, so a total of over 2 years, 2.5 years.
Any residual effects from your having been there for 2.5 years?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You ever talk about it?
I didn't talk about it for almost 10 years, except to people who had also been there. I finally dealt with it and went to see a psychologist when I started having flashbacks. And I was a single parent then. I had 2 young sons and was taking on a new job. And so all of the stresses that were surrounding all of that period. Plus, I'd been working as a bicycle messenger because I had reached the point. Only time in my life I couldn't find the kind of work I really wanted to do, and I ended up to support my family. Ended up as a bicycle messenger in Washington D.C. I was 40 years old.
You got some sort of guts or something.
No, I couldn't find a job anywhere else. Jobs had all dried up. I was supposed to be going to East Africa or West Africa as a Peace Corps director. And then the Peace Corps, Jimmy Carter wimped out, and Peace Corps director, overall director of the Peace Corps, Carolyn Payton was her name. She's the one who recruited me. And I was at the end of that process when she had a shooting match with Sam Brown, guy who was the head of Action, which included the Peace Corps at that time. And Carter did one of the things he always does. He was really a lousy manager in my mind. Instead of just telling these 2 guys that are having this pissing contest to go off someplace, work it out and come back, or he'd fire them both, which is a very standard, basic rule of thumb when you have 2 people you really need and you want them to work out their differences. He fired her. So everything stopped. And it was right at the end of a contract I was working after coming back from Southern Africa, from Lesotho.
So he knew how to do nuclear submarines, but
I could never believe how he could have been the commander of a nuclear submarine. That's scary. Because you're in a contained space and these guys have no place else to... I mean, why wouldn't he do that within the running of his cabinet and sub-cabinet?
Go figure.
Beyond me. Beyond me.
Okay.
So you have the 2 dangers that you have in both those candidates.
Yeah. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Any memberships that you care to disclose?
ACLU, Sierra Club, Defenders of Wildlife, marine mammal thing down in San Francisco. I can't remember the name of it. A bunch of things.
Yeah.
A bunch of things.
Are you a do-gooder?
No.
I believe you are. You're lying to me.
How can I be a do-gooder and do something as evil as lie to you right here in this public space?
They taught you pretty good how to debate. Your parents and that table you sat around and talked about things all over the place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you had to basically you had to bring your game, and the game did not necessarily have to do with hoops. It had to do with things that we talked around the dinner table. In our house, the dinner table, and to some degree breakfast, but mostly dinner table,
Yeah.
would get to would be the place where we get together, where we really have a chance to talk. And pretty much in old school. My dad was from Barbados, and he came as an orphan when he was like 6 or 7 years old. So it was pretty much patriarchal kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, he would be sitting at the head of the table, and the kids, my brother and my sister and I and my mom would be at the other end of the table, right? And we would discuss. And then my grandmother was there too. She was a live wire. And she was a school teacher, you know, former school teacher. Anyway, so we talked about a lot of stuff, but you bring your game. You don't use words. That was really serious area for punishment, using words you don't understand. Because you can always go to the book.
Mm-hmm. That must have been an exciting time for you.
It was. So even the neighborhood I lived in, when we first came up from West Virginia, my dad was head of the English department at a small black college, West Virginia State College, which is now West Virginia State University, Cosmic, whatever. But in those days, a small school. That's the reason I was born in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And my mom her family is she was at that point from West Virginia, very short distance away, Huntington. And my dad came down from New York and headed up the English department. And when my elder brother was getting ready, had turned 5, he had to go to school. It was a Jim Crow school. West Virginia is very much the South.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? And my dad was not going to have that. He picked us up, took a sabbatical. He never went back. I went back. I went to school there, but and he took us, put us on the train, took us up to New York. Didn't have a job. They had a little bit of savings. We moved into what, in retrospect, must look like sort of what a middle-class modification of a shotgun house would. I went back to look at it when I came back to New York, coming back, and I lived. 2 of my sons and I lived in a shotgun house in the bottom in Washington, D.C.
I think there's a few viewers who are not clear on what a shotgun house is. Tell
Shotgun house is long and lean, right?
You stand at the front door and fire a shotgun all the way
clear
through
the house, straight through to the back with one blast from your shotgun, right? So they call them shotgun houses. And that was a happy house. Mm-hmm. And I got there, I was 3 years old, my brother had turned 5. And my dad just wasn't going to, and he found a job. I think he was working for Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola or something like that. And he had a mentor from his graduate school days and stuff like that, who was a real estate broker. And he got his real estate license, all kinds of stuff. And then when I was 9, we moved into, that's like 3 years. It was a great neighborhood. It was back in the day when they sold, there was a horse-drawn cart where they sold vegetables off the back. Yeah. And a house across the street had a barn in it, in the backyard. They call it the garage, but it was truly a barn, right? And after 3 years, he bought a house, mm-hmm. All right? And the house was in a place that up until then had been called Addersley Park. And it was, they renamed it, or they called it what the older name was, St. Albans, Queens, right? Mm-hmm. We were on one corner. At the other corner was Roy Campanella, mm-hmm. All right, and his family. Uh-huh. Middle of the block, Ralph Bunch.
Oh, man.
Bill Kenny, up near the entrance to the Naval Hospital. Bill Kenny of the Ink Spots. Uh-huh. 4 blocks away was Jackie and Rachel Robinson.
Oh my God.
A block and a half away was Illinois Jacquet.
What kind of a neighborhood
and my
was
dad,
that?
we had broken a restrictive covenant. We were about the 3rd family to move in, but within 2 years, that was the milieu in which life was going on.
Oh.
And see, about 5 blocks away was the guy that really, one of my dad's closest friends, was Count Basie, because they grew up together in Harlem.
We got to stop on this one because we're going to run, man, alive. What a life. What a
Hey,
life.
are you kidding? A tapestry, man. A rich tapestry.
So tell me one more thing before we go to the break. Persons from the past, any names come to mind, are alive today that you look up to?
Yeah.
I asked you that before.
I remember that question. And I wasn't too sure of all. I'm not going to give you the same answer because I've had a little bit of time to think about that. And there are a whole bunch of people that I really would have liked to sit down and deal with, just to listen to in some respects. And I told you that Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, is a guy who it just turns me on in terms of the things that of what his mind could grasp. I don't think I could talk to Einstein and really get an enormous amount out of it, but I could be wrong, because I think he's operating in a plane and at a level that might have been beyond me.
I wonder.
I don't know.
I would imagine that he would be able to be with you like an ordinary person.
Well, if you think about thought experiments, if he could do that with his head, and what he did, that's his breakthrough, was the whole idea of thought experiments is what led him to his breakthroughs in terms of mathematics and physics, etc.
Who else you got before we take a break? For me, I got Jesus, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King, for starters.
Nah, not really.
Yeah. What do you think of the Buddha?
Well, that's what I said. He's at the top of my list.
All right.
Might have liked to spend some time with Sun Tzu, the guy who wrote The Art of War. It's one of my great books. One of the books that I really. Why are you looking like that?
Because I'm watching the clock, because you keep going on, and
I
should have
would
taken a break 10 minutes.
I would like to talk to Sun Tzu.
So let's take a break.
Okay, we can do that.
Mr. E, break time. Okay, we are back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we've been talking about so many things, just getting ready to talk about the subject. And so I don't know where we're going to go from here. We're going to talk about how important is the U.S. presidential race? How important? Let's start off. What do you think? How important is it? The U.S. presidential race.
I think we might be at a crossroads of sorts. I said before, I think that Donald Trump would be literally our worst nightmare. Okay? I don't know whether it's almost inconceivable of me that there would be Donald Trump as he has presented himself to the American body politic, to America and the world, as the President of the United States especially after Barack Hussein Obama, after an articulate, intelligent globalist.
How is it that this percentage of the American population voted for Donald Trump? What is it about them, about our country?
But that's not a very big percentage of the American body politic. He started out, what was it, 17 guys? He had 17, there were 17 people in that field. Most of the Republicans haven't voted for him. And it took a while to get it down to even 7 or 5 people. And still, he was getting 25% of the Republican vote.
My point is,
Yes.
with his, how he is and what he's about and the kind of human being he is, how can this percentage of the American populace vote for this man, knowing he looks like Il Duce?
Wait a minute. How successful was Il Duce? How successful was Adolf Hitler? And how much time, blood, and treasure did we have to spend to expunge them from our international organism system? It worked for them. Who do you think those people were? Did they start with a majority of the population? Of course not. They started with a very aggressive, militaristic, ruthless group of thugs. Both Adolf and Benito.
Someone suggested that that table is going to bend down on you, so don't lean on it.
It's a low-budget show.
When people are so troubled as so much of the American populace, there's genuine things to be afraid of, but then they've been taught to even be more fearful than they need to be. Then what they look for is some authoritarian figure
Yeah.
to guide them through the impending turmoil.
Yeah. You
So
forgot one ingredient, though,
why.
in this society.
What is that?
First of all, you have to look at the fact that the peasants get angry. Their anger is suppressed, and then it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And if you can't distract them from their growing anger at being beat up and pushed around and oppressed, all right, they will revolt. Okay?
And the reason they're this way is because they are given enemies
Yes.
that are not
No, but
really
that's,
their enemies.
that's one of the distractions. One of the distractions is called war. That's a distraction. It's a way of identifying a hostile force that's going to take away our national sovereignty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's all the same thing. The United States is an institutionally racist society.
Mm-hmm.
Racism is institutionalized in this society. Systematic racism for hundreds of years. Okay? And one of the ways that you control people, when you had Africans as slaves in America, one of the ways you control them was by using those people who actually were slaves without the legal constructs to support it, just sharecropping poor white folks.
Yeah, yeah.
They were used as a means of keeping these people controlled because there were a few very rich people who were, it sounds familiar, taking advantage of poorer people or poor people to gain an enormous amount of wealth.
So you've got racism and classism.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And those are classic ingredients. And then you've got, one of the distractions is the media. And I'm not just talking about news reporting. What I am talking about is this whole game show, reality show, crazy, weird look at the world. What is a reality show? There's nothing real about reality shows. But that's part of the circus, part of there's less and less bread, but more and more circus.
Yeah.
That's been going on forever.
Do you see sometime in the future where classism, at least classism, will be reduced to an insignificant level. We're talking about worldwide now. We're talking about the survival of life on Earth, the survival of.
I think the prognosis is grave, both in the global sense and in the societal sense, right here in the US of A. I mean, most Americans think of the big argument now is whether or not people are actually exercising their vote. Why is that an argument? It's never been a place where, it's never been one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. It's never been one adult, one vote in the United States of America. It's always been a few people making the decisions about who's going to be the president of the United States. The whole way the system is built. The Electoral College is one perfect example of that. Most people don't even know what it is, how it is, or how it works.
Well, they're going to come after you because you're sounding like a revolutionary.
Basic definition, I learned the basic definition of revolution when I was, I guess, 8 years old or 9 years old. I remember it then. My father looking at me and saying, very simple, it's a fundamental change in a system. That's a revolution.
So we need a fundamental change in the American system?
Got to do something. But we need a fundamental change in the global system.
Where do we start in America for a fundamental change?
And that was why I say the prognosis is grave.
Uh-huh.
Most Americans, regardless of where they stand on an economic scale, believe that they're in a lot better shape than they are. But more importantly, they're not prepared to give up anything. Remember the guy called the great communicator? I think his name was Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Do you know what made him the great communicator? The fact that he was just telling most Americans what they want to hear, that it is our manifest destiny to live as well as we do, regardless of what it costs to provide us with all of the creature comforts that we're supposed to have. That's why we have such a hard time even talking about, much less moving on, the whole idea of climate change. We're killing this planet. This planet is going to die on us. And we are the perpetrators. We're the perps.
Does the American empire have anything to do with what we're talking about?
Of course it does. All of the imperial empires. All of the empires do by definition.
Is the American empire waning?
Time will tell.
What do you think?
The prognosis there is grave. No, everybody looks. Hitler modeled the 1,000-year Reich on what?
I don't know.
The Roman Empire.
Oh, yes, of course.
Almost 1,000 years. Hell, we're only 240 years down.
They got a little longer to go, eh?
We have just begun. And you can't get people. We should be I heard somebody say it. I don't know who the hell it was. I was half asleep, and somebody on a TV said, we should be looking at this the same way we looked at World War II. And it was the first time I'd heard it on a major network. And I sort of woke up and it was gone. I said, what? Because I've been telling people, or saying that to people for decades, that the way we look at the environment and the way we look at this incredible biosphere that we live in, I'm surely not the first person that said it, but we should be on a war footing to turn that shit around. But we can't, because of classism and elitism, and because there's such a dichotomy between the people who have most and the people who have least. There's so many of us who have less, and then these little tiny groups of people.
But then there's such a gradual application of austerity that's been going on in America now for a long, long time, until people don't realize what's happening, how it is they can hardly feed themselves and their families, as you were saying a moment ago, about where the monies go to the super rich and the people who are ordinary citizens.
I'm sorry, what's your point?
That is still ongoing, and will be getting worse as time goes by. So how can we have people become more aware of what's going on and revolt?
I don't have the answer. Obviously, don't have the. If I had the answer to that, I would have spent a lot more time working at it. I remember going down to Morehouse for bumping around and back in the day, and there was Malcolm X was giving a talk.
Mm-hmm.
And he said there's a whole bunch of us sitting in this big auditorium and stuff, and he said, how many people here are more than 20 years old? And in a college auditorium, a whole bunch of hands went up. He said, you're all slaves. And, people were saying, what do you mean slaves? We're here, we're activists, we're this, we're that. He said, when you become a revolutionary, you become aware of one simple fact, that you're hastening the day of your death. And if you're going to school, if you have not stood up and changed things fundamentally in your life, then you are slaves. Then for Malcolm, in those days, in those early days, there was no middle ground between a slave and a revolutionary. You were either one or the other. And I think I told you the last time we talked, my dad said there are only two basic litmus tests for whether you're a free man or not. He wasn't talking about a revolution, talking about being a free man. He said, one, you have to be in charge of the definition of yourself. That's a big step. You define who you are. Little Chris Thorne, okay? I gave you a name, but who you are, you define that. Nobody else defines it. If anybody else defines that, you can't ever be free. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is you have to take responsibility for everything in your life. Everything that happens to you, every decision you make, you have to take responsibility for it.
So
if you ask me, when do I think it's going to happen? Americans are fat, lazy people. They're used to having all sorts of creature comforts. They cannot conceive of what it's like to live on $1 a day. There is no comparison. You could be speaking a strange but obscure dialect of Martian, and they would understand it better. They have no frame, no construct that they can grasp. Americans? What's one of our biggest problems? Obesity. Where does it come from?
It's a big problem.
Eat too much, exercise too little.
Okay, we're getting close to time to stop.
Okay.
When the election is over,
yes,
how will the rest of the world react if Trump is the new president?
One would hope they would ostracize us, but what they will do is they will basically do whatever they can to make it in a world where we are the single superpower. Now, the question is, if something as horrible as that should happen, and people are underestimating, we keep waiting for people to come to their senses, all right? They didn't in Italy, they didn't in Germany. Why? What makes us better?
Because we're Americans.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The institution of slavery existed in this country for how long? It's a part of our DNA. It's a part of the roots that this tree has branches growing out of and reaching all over the world.
But people like us don't experience the kind of racism we're talking about when we were kids a long time ago, before the Civil Rights Act and all those kinds of things. I think the American person of color doesn't realize how bad it could be, and it's moving in the same direction, and it will get that bad again unless we do indeed revolt.
Okay.
All right. So the clock is winding down, and
yeah, I know.
I'm winding down, and we better...
That's the way it goes.
So you have a couple minutes left. Look in the camera and tell the viewers what you want to tell them that comes to mind for you right now. Anything at all about our show or the world or anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, wake up. When you talk about it's not, it's better than it was. No, it's not. It's just different. And you got to understand that you're going to have to give up some things if we're going to save this planet. This planet is dying. And if we don't do something, if we don't move from where we are, literally, to a war footing to combat climate change, we will be remembered, if there's anyone to remember us, as being the people that killed this place, this beautiful blue marble, the earth. That's it.
That's enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been fun again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice talking to you.
Yeah.
All right, we deal with Captain Jack later on.
Okay. Jack Daniels. Okay. Any public service announcements? To watch my shows on the web, Google Don Baham, YouTube. There's hundreds of shows that we've done over the past 16 years. And take a look at some of those shows. And the ACLU, without the American Civil Liberties Union, our civil liberties would be in more jeopardy than they have been for a long time. So join the ACLU. And we got to tell you about corporate personhood. We got to end corporate personhood. Go to that movetoamend.org and talk about corporations are not people and money is not speech. Yeah. To learn more about the humanists and humanism, go to that website or to the Portland, Oregon website, www.afd-pdx.org. Oh boy, it's time to say goodnight. Thanks for watching. And remember KFC, and not that KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you, Mike, and to you, Mr. E, and to you, Bonobo, and to you too, Chris. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.